Hey everyone, I just want to start this video off with a trigger warning. The main theme of this video revolves around death, because that's what I believe is one of the main themes of the album. As you can see, here's the numbers for suicide hotlines in different countries and websites that will help you if you're struggling. There's always hope out there and you're important. So here's your warning. I hope you get something out of this video. 2020 has been a terrifying year for us all, not just politically, but especially mentally. When I think of 2020, I start to think about all the times where people just started to show their true colors. People outing themselves as morally selfish, and even leaving other people who they once cared about behind. Add that for literally being trapped for most of the year due to the pandemic. For me, it was anxiety-inducing because I started to finally put a label on fears that I knew I had, but never knew how to describe. One fear that sticks out to me is the fear of lacking self-control, or in a singular word, impulsivity. Now don't worry, I know how to fully control myself, and I know what to say and what not to say, but the fear mainly lies in impulsivity as a desire to make everyone happy, and continuing that cycle so much that I forget to focus on my own well-being. And because of that, it's become a factor in my depression, obviously. Knowing that I could have done something immediately because it would have made someone happy, but deciding to be selfish for some stupid reason. It gives me a sense of misery that's indescribable. So why am I telling you this? Well, I think that fear is pretty prominent among everyone, but I don't think I've heard it explained better than in Phoebe Bridgers' sophomore album, Punisher. Phoebe Bridgers is one of my favorite musicians working in the industry right now. I absolutely love her as a person, but her music is kind of an enigma. She talks about how she views life, events in her life, and mental health in a way where she makes it explicitly clear that's what she's talking about, but presents it in such a unique light. She presents it like she literally wants you to look in her point of view, and I think that's what makes her music so devastating. Her use of perspective in Punisher is so unexpected that once the album concludes, you may feel a little breathless, I should say. I mean, I'm talking about an album that starts like this.
I don't know when you got taller. See our reflection in the water.
And then ends like this. So we got some things to cover. If you asked me what Punisher was about, I feel like I would give you a lot of answers. Like, it's about identity, accountability, codependency, growing old, hanging on to the past, and death. But I think above all else, Punisher talks about heroism and growing old, as I stated before. Not heroism in the conventional way though. We'll get to that later. We see that the character of Punisher is someone with a lot of fears and regrets. She's someone who we learned that in the past has dealt with a lot of death and pain in her life, and she can't bring herself out of that mourning. It's basically been eating her alive her entire life. She feels the need to help others when she can't even help herself, so to speak. In the album's opening track, Garden Song, we see her reflecting on her childhood in her hometown somewhere in California. But as she grows up, she realizes not only how fast life actually goes, how alone she genuinely feels, but also the ugliness that the world has in store. It's no coincidence one of the album's opening lyrics references skinheads. And no coincidence she says, "I don't know how you got taller, it must be something in the water." That lyric also shows her childlike qualities and fear of growing old, as if aging is some kind of magical thing. She realizes that the older she gets, not only is she closer to death, but she has to deal with the fact that people do in fact leave, sometimes in the most sudden way. She also has to deal with the fact that people that she once trusted are actually some of the most toxic people in her life. Moon Song, for example, I think is about relationship abuse, and how they argue over the most trivial of things. Like they argue if they should support Eric Clapton or John Lennon, even though they probably shouldn't be supported. But she caves to this argument anyway and says, "I hate tears in heaven, but I feel bad that his baby died," because she doesn't want him to get any more angry. Throughout the album, she tries to fight toxic behavior without even realizing that some of the people in her life that she claims to care about are people who are indeed toxic. As weird as this sounds, I think most of us can relate to that. This kind of reflection of the past always gets involved in most of the songs on the album, but they always link back to the idea of growing older and even death. One thing that caught me off guard when listening to the album was the use of fanfare. In Kyoto, the fanfare kind of made sense for how the song was presented. It's easily the fastest song on the album. But then I Know the End uses it, and that's when it clicked for me. I could be wrong, but I think the fanfare in the album represents anticipation of death. In Kyoto, it's no coincidence that the very first use of the fanfare starts at but I think that's most obvious in I Know the End, where the horns grow louder and louder when they keep saying the end is near, leading to one of the most unexpected album finales I've heard in a while, which is the screaming. Now what's up with that screaming? Well, I think she killed herself. First off, the frequent end is near chant is a huge sign the end is obviously referring to death, but with the screaming, I believe that's her in the process of her death. Her body is basically shutting down, and all of the screams and disorientation around her is all happening internally. It's in that moment she realizes that the choices she made to kill herself was a horrible mistake. And I think it's made more obvious with the whisper screaming, which is reality, which happens at the very end of the album. In her mind, she's screaming for mercy. She knows she did something irreversible, and saying she's terrified would be an understatement. But in reality, she's dead. There's no reversing it. I love how in the music video for I Know the End, she confronts her older self as if she realizes she'll never have the opportunity to watch herself grow that old, and she'll never know what she did in the rest of her life. I mentioned that heroism is one of the more crucial themes in the album, and I explained a little bit in the beginning of this video, but I want to go in depth on what it means to me exactly, and why I think it's a bit bittersweet. It's very easy to want to be a hero. You want to stand up for what's right, you want to help someone out if they're in danger, you get the idea. But what I see in the character of Punisher is someone who, even though she's been through so much trauma and depression in her life, still feels the need to save everyone. She puts other people before herself at all times, which is undeniably a good thing. It's always good to be selfless, but it's so much so that she can't even save herself. Throughout the album, she starts to have epiphanies about that. She starts to cut toxic people out of her life, and she starts questioning her identity. But she feels this sense of guilt whenever something bad happens in the world, as if they're somehow her fault, even though they're clearly not. But even though she's been through that abuse and toxicity, she still kept that want to help others, even upon realizing she can't save everyone. It breaks her heart, obviously, but there's that sense of pride when you realize that you truly deserved better in your life. You deserve better than how your partner manipulated you into thinking you're worthless. You deserve better than when that teacher humiliated you in front of the class when you were a kid. You deserve better than when some random stranger berates you just for being yourself. You can't save everyone, obviously, and you should always be kind, but if someone takes advantage of your genuine kindness, then you should know you do indeed deserve better. It might take a while for you to realize that, but it's always been there. I'm someone who's been through relationship abuse, toxic friendships, bullying, etc., and it's caused me to have pretty bad depression and horrible anxiety. But it's also given me this savior complex. It's caused me to always want to satisfy others because with the abuse I've endured in the past, and eventually getting out of it, I got the mindset to treat others the opposite of how I was treated. and I'll probably always be that way. But also because of how I was treated in the past, it's genuinely so hard for me to convince myself that I'm worth something. I never really thought very highly of myself. Most people know that and I joke about it a lot. As I grew older though, I realized that having this savior complex is good. It's a great thing to be selfless, but there should also be enough room for yourself. Because even though other people exist aside from yourself, you're still important. Your feelings and aspirations will always be valid. It's like balancing everything out. It's good to save people, but it's also good to save yourself. I discovered Phoebe in a time where I was probably in the lowest I've ever been in terms of my self-confidence. I want to say it was late 2018 when I discovered her. When hearing Stranger in the Alps back in 2018 and now hearing Punisher, it didn't cure my lack of self-confidence. As you probably guessed, most of Phoebe's songs are pretty depressing, but I felt like I could finally exhale. Even if it wasn't all happy, I felt like I was seen and even accepted. I felt like in a world where I blamed myself for everything, there was some ounce of encouragement that I belonged somewhere. That I was worth more than how I may have been treated. I was worth more than what my mind may tell me. That loneliness you may feel along with that savior complex doesn't make you a weak person by any regards. It just makes you human. And the fact that you're still here with us, even if you might be suffering, makes you the most beautiful person on this goddamn planet. But remember, you always deserve better in your life.
You